Imagine the sky not as a vast, empty blue, but as a chessboard, a three-dimensional arena where knights of the modern age duel for supremacy. Today, we're rewinding the clock to a pivotal decade, the 1950s, a time when the very nature of air combat was rewritten in contrails and cannon fire. The Second World War had ended, but the peace was fragile. A new kind of conflict, the Cold War, was casting a long shadow across the globe, and in the skies, a technological arms race was just beginning to heat up. This wasn't just about building planes anymore. It was about defining the future of aerial warfare. The piston engines that had roared over Europe and the Pacific were giving way to the scream of a new technology, the jet engine. And with this new power came a new set of rules, new tactics, and new heroes. The Korean Peninsula in the early 1950s became the first major stage for this new drama. When the Korean War broke out, it wasn't just a ground war. High above the battles raging below, a parallel conflict was unfolding. This was where the United States and its allies, flying under the United Nations banner, came face to face with a formidable new adversary. Early in the war, American pilots flying propeller-driven planes like the P-51 Mustang, a legend of World War II, found themselves hopelessly outclassed. They'd be on a mission, and suddenly a silver streak would flash past them, faster than anything they had ever seen. It was a shock to the system. This silver streak was the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-15. The MiG-15 was a game-changer. With its swept-back wings, powerful Climo VK1 engine itself, a remarkable story. Being a reverse-engineered British Rolls-Royce Nini engine, it could climb faster and fly higher than anything the UN forces initially had. For American pilots, it was a terrifying sight. They were fighting a ghost, an aircraft that could appear, strike with its devastating cannons, and then vanish, climbing away at a speed they simply couldn't match. The psychological impact was immense. The balance of power in the sky had been dramatically upset. The United States Air Force knew they needed an answer, and they needed it fast. That answer came in the form of the North American F-86 Sabre. On the surface, the Sabre and the MiG-15 looked surprisingly similar. Both had swept wings, a design lesson learned from captured German research at the end of World War II. But beneath the skin, they were very different machines, built with different philosophies. The MiG-15 was like a lightweight boxer designed for a quick, brutal knockout. It could outclimb and outaccelerate the Sabre at high altitudes. And its armament of two 23mm cannons and one massive 37mm cannon was designed to tear bombers apart. A single hit from that 37mm shell could be catastrophic. The F-86 Sabre, on the other hand, was more like a fencer. It was more stable, a better gun platform, especially at high speeds. Its 6.50 caliber machine guns didn't have the single-shot punch of the MiG's cannons, but they had a much higher rate of fire and carried more ammunition, allowing a pilot to hose down a target. Critically, the Sabre had a more advanced gun sight, the A1CM, which used radar to help the pilot calculate the correct lead for a shot. In a high-speed jet-on-jet dogfight, where targets are moving at hundreds of miles per hour. That split-second calculation was the difference between a miss and a kill. This was a turning point. Victory was no longer just about the pilot's skill or the plane's raw performance. It was becoming a battle of technology. And so, the stage was set for one of history's most legendary aerial rivalries. Over the Yalu River, in a slice of airspace in northwestern Korea that became known as Mig Alley. These two titans clashed daily. The dogfights were nothing like the swirling melees of World War II. These were engagements happening at speeds approaching the sound barrier at altitudes over 40,000 feet. Decisions had to be made in an instant. A moment's hesitation was fatal. Pilots described it as a blur of motion, a high-stakes high-G ballet where your life depended on your reaction time and your trust in your machine. The tactics evolved rapidly. American Sabre pilots learned to exploit their aircraft's strengths. They would try to lure the MiGs into turning fights at lower altitudes. Where the Sabre had the advantage in maneuverability, they knew the MiG pilots, often highly skilled Soviet veterans flying unofficially, wanted to use their superior climb rate. The classic MiG tactic was a yo-yo, a high-speed dive from a superior altitude, a quick-firing pass, and then using their energy to rocket back up to safety. The Sabre pilots had to counter this. They developed the Jetstream formation, a more flexible version of the classic finger four, which allowed for better mutual support. Communication and teamwork became more critical than ever. You didn't just fight your own battle. You fought as a unit, with your wingmen being your eyes and your shield. This era also solidified the idea of the jet fighter as a symbol of national prestige and power. Back home, the public followed the exploits of the Sabre pilots. They became the new aces, the modern-day knights, continuing the legacy of legends from previous wars. The kill ratios, often claimed to be as high as 10-1 in favor of the Sabres, were trumpeted as proof of American technological and pilot superiority. While the true numbers are still debated by historians, with recent access to Soviet records suggesting a more balanced fight, the perception at the time was clear. The Sabre had won the day. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a powerful piece of Cold War propaganda. But the Korean War was just the beginning. The lessons learned in Mig Alley echoed through the design halls of every major aviation power. The 1950s became a decade of unbelievable aeronautical progress. The sound barrier, once a mysterious and dangerous wall, was routinely broken. The Century Series fighters in the US, like the F-100 Super Sabre, the first operational fighter capable of supersonic speed in level flight, and the F-104 Starfighter, a missile with a man in it, pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. But the focus shifted. Pure dogfighting maneuverability began to take a back seat to sheer speed, altitude, and the new king of aerial combat, the guided missile. This technological leap changed the very definition of a fighter pilot. They were no longer just stick-and-rudder men. They had to become systems managers. Cockpits became a complex array of dials, switches, and radar screens. The pilot's brain had to process information from their own senses and from the aircraft's electronic nervous system. The Fateh 6's simple radar gun sight was the seed from which grew the complex fire control systems of later decades. The air-to-air missile, first introduced in the mid-50s, promised a new kind of combat, one fought from beyond visual range. The idea was that future dogfights wouldn't be dogfights at all, but electronic duels fought miles apart. So, when we look back at the 1950s, we see more than just a collection of cool-looking vintage jets. We see a fundamental shift in military thinking. The sky became a technological battlefield. The duels over MiG. Ali between the Sabre and the MiG-15 were the fiery crucible in which the modern Air Force was forged. It was a decade that proved that in the jet age, victory wouldn't be determined by courage alone. It would depend on a complex equation of radar, range, reaction time, and the relentless pursuit of technological superiority. The legacy of those silver jets dueling in the cold, thin air over Korea is still with us today, in the DNA of every advanced fighter that guards the skies. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this look at aviation history, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. It really helps us out. We'll see you in the next one.